Hello everyone. Up first here at the iDesk, a brutal crackdown in Bahrain. Security forces swarmed a public square in the capital of Manama where thousands of anti-government demonstrators had been camping out. The police, they came without warning while many of those protesters were sleeping and fired rubber bullets and tear gas. Watch and listen. Frightening scenes there. Well, hours later, convoys of more than 50 military vehicles equipped with machine guns and razor wire rolled in to occupy the area. At least 3 people were killed and dozens were injured. A nearby hospital was a scene of chaos. Senior international correspondent Nick Robertson reports.
Doctors and nurses struggle to save lives. It's 5 a.m. in one of Bahrain's principal hospitals. The emergency room is overflowing, victims of a violent confrontation with police. According to medical workers, hundreds wounded as police cracked down on peaceful protesters sleeping out at a makeshift protest camp in the centre of the city.
15 years old. His name Murtada.
This 15-year-old boy with buckshot wounds to his abdomen and arms tells me he was asleep when the police attacked around 3 a.m. Friends carried him to the hospital, he says. Another older man describes how he was awakened by tear gas being fired, explains where a canister of gas hit him high on his thighs. Outside the emergency room on the hospital forecourt, angry protesters chant, "The people want to bring down the regime." Barely 2 hours earlier, more than 1,000 armed police in a carefully coordinated operation swarmed the protest camp. Until then, it had been peaceful. Families, tents, food, a festive spirit, protest placards being prepared, a defiant stand against the ruling regime being mounted.
You know, in Bahrain, we need freedom.
They say they are modelling themselves on Tahrir Square in Cairo. But here, in this tiny Persian Gulf nation, the protest is not simply about overthrowing an unpopular leadership. It's religious. Most protesters are from the Shia Muslim majority, long dominated by Sunni rulers, and are demanding jobs, including positions in Bahrain's security services. At stake, stability of this American ally on an island once claimed by Iran, not just home to the US Fifth Fleet, but at the choke point of the world's busiest oil shipping lanes. As day breaks over Bahrain, the battle lines are being drawn. The protesters say they are more determined than ever to overthrow the government. The government could not have made its position clearer. Protests will not be tolerated. And with the sunrise, this, a convoy of about 50 army armoured personnel carriers driving down the main highway towards the Pearl roundabout and the centre of the city. Alongside the battle vehicles and their heavy machine guns, trucks of razor wire, the government has upped the ante.
Nick Robertson reporting there. Well, right now we want to take you to New York, where the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is addressing the media, making comments on the situation right now in the Middle East and Arab nations. Let's listen.
From Bahrain overnight are deeply troubling. Here, as elsewhere, violence should not be used against the peaceful demonstrators and against the journalists. It must stop, and those responsible must be brought to justice. In responding to peaceful protest, authorities have an obligation to respect human rights. There should be no violence from any quarter. I urge all parties to exercise restraint. The United Nations has been urging the leaders in the region, as elsewhere around the world, to listen attentively to the people and to respond to their legitimate aspirations. I will be reaching out again in the days ahead to leaders in the region to reiterate that message. I will say it once again, the situation calls for bold reforms, not repression. Sustainable progress can take root in places where people are empowered, where governments are responsive, where growth is inclusive. In a number of countries, the transitions have been initiated or reforms have been promised. It is crucial that leaders deliver on those promises and that processes of reform are built on transparent and inclusive dialogue with a broad involvement of political parties and civil society. Turning now to Egypt.
All right, we're going to break away from that news conference there in New York. Just to reiterate, the Secretary General of the UN saying that he will be reaching out to leaders in the region of Arab nations to say that now is the time to act on promises that they've made to their people and that he's urging restraint of all parties there. Let's bring in now Nick Robertson. He joins us now on the line from Manama, the capital of Bahrain. Nick, we just showed our viewers scenes of chaos from just a short time ago. Bring us up to speed with what's happening in the capital now.
Well, right now, a lot of the stores are closed, but there is traffic back out on the highways. The situation feels much more normal around many parts of the capital. However, there continues to be tight security, the army providing security with armored personnel carriers at the Pearl roundabout where the incidents took place last night. The government has said, the Interior Ministry has said, that last night they say that 2 people were killed and 92 people wounded. They say 50 of their security officers were wounded. 2 of them are in serious condition. They say that they arrested 1 person and they found and have shown on the state television here guns that were found at the camp. They say knives were found too. We've also heard from the Ministry of Defense today, which has issued a very strong warning to citizens here not to gather in groups to put in jeopardy their own safety and that of other citizens. So the government has put into place very strong security measures to prevent further protest groups from gathering at this time, Aisha.
Nick, as you're there in the capital speaking to people, what's your sense? Will people defy that call? Will they come out for more protests?
Last night they were enraged. They said that they'd heard from the government, from the king in fact, saying that he apologized for the deaths of protesters earlier in the week. But they say, now look at the way we've been treated. The government has said that the protesters had fair warning to get off the square at 3 o'clock in the morning. The protesters we talked to said that they had no warning and that they were sleeping, that there were women and children among them who were sleeping when they were chased off the square by the police. So the 2 stories from both sides don't add up, and that really seems to be at the crux of the issue here. There are 2 divergent opinions and views. The government has provided security and stability back to the city at this hour, but what will the protesters do next? They said last night that they would continue with the protest, so it is an uncertain situation, but a degree of calm that didn't exist maybe 12 hours ago has been restored, Aisha.
Senior international correspondent Nick Robertson joining us there from Bahrain. Nick, appreciate it. Thank you. When security forces moved against protesters, social media websites lit up with dramatic reports from Bahrain. There was this from Hussein, live witness report, tear gas, got beaten with batons, even kids got smacked down, people bleeding, massacre, thousands of cops. Hassan tweeted, relatives of victims are beaten brutally in hospital parking, the numbers beyond hospital capacity, people in terror. A short time ago, Emil posted this, just went through Lulu on my way to office, had to accept not to take pictures and be walked by soldiers, tanks, soldiers everywhere. Well, the wave of discontent sweeping across the Middle East is now surfacing in Libya, where internet activists have called for a day of rage. Demonstrators set a police station on fire in the eastern city of Al-Baida, and there are unconfirmed reports that 4 people were killed in clashes with security forces. Let's get the very latest. Fanula Sweeney has been following the tumultuous events in the region and joins us now with more on the developments in Libya. And because journalist access to Libya is severely restricted at the moment, she's reporting from neighboring Egypt in Cairo. Fanula?
We are getting a sporadic but consistent picture of demonstrations again today in Libya, Aisha. Last night, those clashes you referred to in Al Baida, unconfirmed reports that 70 people were injured with live fire, sniper fire. Indeed, the director of a hospital in Al Baida allegedly saying that he has run out of medication to treat these people. We're hearing of people being detained, preemptive arrests before any demonstrations, and also more clashes and demonstrations today. Demonstrations in Tripoli, we heard, were being broken up and dispersed by the military. We're also hearing of more demonstrations in El Benghazi, which we had known began these clashes 2 days ago. Those clashes began because of the arrest of a human rights lawyer, but we should stress that SMS, texting, phone lines, internet are all sporadic, if not down completely, and it is very difficult to get a complete picture of what is happening. But needless to say that the picture we are getting is that arrests are continuing and the clashes and demonstrations also.
Fionnuala, let me also ask you about Egypt, where you are. Tomorrow will make it a week since Hosni Mubarak stepped down. What are we hearing in the way of any kind of demonstrations, any kind of protests?
Well, we are hearing of demonstrations today outside, for example, the Algerian embassy in support of the Algerian people. Tomorrow it's expected there will be a huge demonstration of thanks for what took place here a week ago. The numbers are expected to be fairly large. We also know that this is happening against the backdrop of a real slowing of the Egyptian economy, and this has the interim government extremely concerned. The figures are varying just as to how much money the economy of Egypt is losing, but it's expected to be in the hundreds of millions. So the question now, after these demonstrations on Friday, is how will the military government react to the continuing protests and demonstrations, not only in the state sector, but also in the private sector, where people now have extremely high expectations following their victory last week in the ouster of President Hosni Mubarak.
Fionnuala Sweeney joining us there from Cairo. Thanks, Fionnuala.